How the hell are ya? This is Caleb Jones, and this is the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. Freedom-focused lifestyle design for men. What is the overall objective of the Alpha Male 2.0? I've said it a billion times. I'm sure I will say it another billion times. If I only had a penny for every time I said this. Actually, what's funny is I probably do. I probably do have a penny, or maybe more than a penny, for every time I've said this phrase. And that is consistent long-term happiness, which is differentiated from normal happiness. What most normal men feel, beta males and alpha male 1.0s, are moments of happiness or brief times of happiness, not happiness as a near high consistent state over 20, 25 years plus. That's only for the Alpha Male 2.0. And in order to accomplish this, I have talked in great detail in all my content, my books, my blogs, my videos, my courses, what have you, on various specific techniques on how to do that. And mostly what we focus on here in Alpha Male 2.0 is to design a lifestyle of very high freedom, because most men, not all men, but most men are happy to the degree to which they are free. So obviously, step one in this process is to design and actually implement a lifestyle where you are free every day of your life, long term, many, many decades in a row. And that's good. You need to do that. But it's not quite that simple. There are other aspects to your mind that you have to get right. I've talked about that in my YouTube videos. I've talked about that in The Unchained Man. You've got to clean out your societal programming. You have to deal with your obsolete biological wiring, because both of those things are not designed to make you happy. They're designed to accomplish other things. One of the many ways in which you can sabotage your own long-term happiness and cause you frustration, angst, resentment, and even anger is when you don't accept the objective reality that the world is constantly changing. And maybe you've heard the dumb saying, I've heard it, that the only constant in life is change. And that is true. Things change. And we live in an era now where things are changing more rapidly and more quickly and with more frequency than they ever have before in all of human history. And this rate of change is actually going to accelerate. It's not going to slow down or plateau. It's going to get worse. Worse as in the rate of change is going to increase even more. So that means if you are pissed off or frustrated or resentful or angry about the fact that things are different now than they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 37 years ago, you will never accomplish this state of long-term consistent masculine happiness that the Alpha Male 2.0 is given. You're never going to accomplish this, because every time something changes, you're going to be all pissed off and you're going to be resentful and say, that's bullshit. That's not fair. This is wrong. This is evil. We need to go back to the way we used to do it, because you're pissed off about change. One of the necessary ingredients of long-term consistent masculine happiness is the acceptance of this. The way you need to make money and pay your bills and accomplish your lifestyle objectives is different now than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. It's different. 20 years from now, it will be different from today. It will be different. And if you are pissed off about the fact that it was different in the 50s as of today, or is different in the 80s or the 90s or whatever era in which you romanticize, and a lot of guys do this, especially right-wing guys, then you're going to be pissed off for the rest of your life. It's true with also women and dating. The way you need to get laid today, the way you need to find a quality partner today, the way you need to get married today or settle down today or have kids today is radically different than it was just 25 years ago, which is not that long ago. I mean, I was in my 20s. It was radically different in the 90s. It was radically different in the 80s. It was certainly radically different before my time in the 50s and 60s. It was radically, radically different. There are some good differences and there are some bad differences, but the point is it has changed. And again, if you're going to walk around life like so many men do on the internet, furious that things have changed, in many cases for the worse, and I agree that in many cases the changes are worse, but some of the changes are better. We'll get that in a second. But if you're going to be pissed off about this constantly, no matter what you do in terms of designing an Alpha Male 2.0 lifestyle of maximum freedom, therefore creating maximum long-term happiness, it's not really going to help. I mean, it will help. That's not true. It will help. Instead of being pissed off at a scale of 1 to 10, your anger, instead of being a 10, will probably be a 7. But I would rather your anger be a 0. My anger is a 0. 1 maybe sometimes at worst when I read about political stuff. Maybe it's a 1 or 2, but I don't really care anymore because I'm moving out of the country. But anyway, I digress. The point is, there's no point in doing this stuff if you're going to be resentful, not even angry, just resentful that things are different now. And the more right-wing you are, the bigger risk this is to you. The older you are, the bigger risk this is to you in both cases. And you've got to be aware of this. You have to understand and accept that the way you make money, the way you get laid, your sex life, your dating life, your business life, the way you used to invest. Here's a big change. Prior to when I was born in the early 70s. And prior to the early 70s, men didn't have to worry about investing skills. They didn't have to. You know why? Because they had these things that they don't really have anymore called pensions. And so the way it worked is you went to your job, your employer just socked money away from you magically, and then you stayed at the same job for 40 years, and then you retired, and your employer basically cut you a check for the rest of your life until you died as an old man. You didn't have to worry about, should I invest in mutual funds? What should I invest in? Men prior to the early 1970s really didn't have to worry about that stuff. Then it switched to things like 401ks and IRAs, and now it's even more complicated. So now, unfortunately, the change we have is that men now need to become almost miniature experts in investing because they have to cover their own retirements. And you could say, well, that's bullshit. That's not fair. We should go back to the way it was in the 1960s and 50s and 40s and blah, 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 which is never going to happen. So you can be pissed off about it, or you can say, oh, well, that's the way it goes. I need to accept these changes and I need to adjust with the times. I don't know if you've heard this metaphor, but when a hurricane comes along, the trees that get broken are the big, giant, thick, giant redwoods. Those big, big, thick trees, those are the ones that break. The trees that survive the hurricane are the ones that are flexible. They move around and they're not as rigid and they're not as set in their ways. They're flexible. So when the hurricane comes through the forest or whatever the fuck, the big, strong, badass trees are saying, nope, I'm not changing. I'm right here. Fuck you. Those are the ones that die, get snapped in half. The flexible ones are the ones that survive. And as the hurricane goes through, when the hurricane leaves, the ones that are standing are the little flexible trees. I'm exaggerating slightly, but you get my point. There are a lot of men that I have known throughout the years, friends of mine, guys I went to school with, long-term coworkers or guys I used to work with, men I've known for, 20, 30 years plus in my life. Some of these men were very capable, very intelligent, very hardworking, great guys, good guys, goal-setting, motivated guys. And their lives turned out poorly, not because they weren't smart, they were smart. Not because they were lazy, they were very hardworking. Not because they did the wrong things, but because they refused to accept the reality that life changes, that society changes, that economies change, that dating and relationship dynamics with women change. And they refused to accept these things, so they kept on pushing, banging their heads against the wall like it was the 1950s or like it was the 1980s. And they end up in all kinds of chaos. Men who insisted on getting traditionally monogamously married, sometimes 2 and 3 times in a row, and got destroyed by multiple divorces. Men in business who insisted on trying to make old style businesses work that are no longer in demand today and lost their ass and lost their savings and lost their livelihoods and had to go work at Starbucks and shit like that. Before they were making 6-figure incomes. These were men who refused to acknowledge the fact that the world is changing. And I don't want you to be like that. I want you to be an alpha male 2.0. I want you to be long-term, consistent, happy. And that means that you must constantly change and adjust to the new changes, even if you disagree with those changes. And let me explain that, because that's a fundamental key difference. I am not saying you have to nod your head and agree with the changes. Most of the changes that I have seen in society, at least anyway, in my lifetime, starting from the 1970s and 80s when I really grew up in the 80s, most of the changes that I have seen were negative and are still negative. I don't agree with most of these changes. This is where I agree with my more conservative right-wing brothers. I agree that they're bad and they're negative. Now, a lot of them are really good. Some of the changes I have seen are fantastically good. I mean, amazingly good. But a lot of them have been very, very bad. And we're going to continue to see more negative changes, particularly in the Western world, over the next decade or two. It's going to get bad. It's going to get even worse. But instead of going on the internet and saying, this is bullshit, this is unfair, this is a terrible way to do it, we need to go back to the way we used to do it in the blank, whatever the 1800s, the 1950s, 1980s, whatever era you tend to romanticize about whatever you're talking about, I don't do that. Instead, what I do is, okay, this is a change. I can't control the change. I don't have any control over external society. I am now going to have to modify my approach so I can succeed and thrive in this new environment with my Alpha Male 2.0 lifestyle. And that means, in terms of Alpha Male 2.0, my business life, my financial life, and my woman life. I'm going to have to adjust. I shouldn't have to adjust. I wish I didn't have to, but I'm going to have to. So instead of bitching and moaning about the changes, I'm going to adjust. So how can I adjust? And that's what I sit down and do some research, write out a battle plan. I make some guesses and I experiment. I experiment both in my business life and in my woman life. And if you've read my content, you've read many scenarios in which I've done that in both. And I try different things to see if they work. And if they don't, I stop. If they do work, great. Oh my gosh, now I'm good to go. And now I have successfully adjusted to the change and my business life is good and my woman life is good. See how this works? And I'm going to have to keep doing this for the rest of my life. I fully intend on living to the year 100. Fully intend on this. Matter of fact, I just read a thing the other day that babies born today in 2020, their average life expectancy will be between 93 and 96 years old. And I think that is actually much lower. I think they're not accounting for exponential growth in certain health technologies. I think it's going to be much more than that. But I fully plan on living well into my 90s and certainly probably past my 90s. And I am almost 50, so I am looking at another around 50 years on this earth before I pass into the next world. And that means that for the next 50 fucking years, I'm going to have to keep changing and keep adjusting. At no point, even when I quote unquote retire, now I will never retire, but my version of retirement, which will be a long time from now, but even then, I'm still going to have to, on a semi-regular basis, adjust with the changes. I will never ever get to the point, and I've made peace with this, and I want you to make peace with this. I have made emotional peace with the reality that I am never going to get to the point in my life where I could go, okay, thank God I'm done changing forever. My finances, my investments, my business, my income, my dating, my marriage, my woman life, my family, it's all perfect. And now I never need to change a thing. I can just sit there for the next 25 years and ride on this. I will never be able to experience that. Our forefathers in the 1600s, Middle Ages, they could do that. They theoretically could get to a certain point, maybe if they were very lucky, where they could get to a point and say, okay, good. And they could live the rest of their lives, 20, 30, 40 years, well, probably not that much because Ben didn't live that long, but you know what I'm saying, and never worry about changing with anything. We don't have that opportunity. We don't have that. There are pros and cons to living in the modern era, and that's one of the cons. You're going to have to accept this. Now, that's the first step. The next step is to stop resisting it and stop resenting it. There are guys, they're called conservatives. And these are guys who are very, very angry and spend most of their lives, in many cases, not all the cases, but in many cases, frowning at the entire world about all the changes that have occurred they've seen in their lifetimes. And they spend their lives focusing on the negatives of these changes instead of saying what I just said, instead of resenting the change, adjusting to the change and making adjustments in their life, even though they disagree with it. I'm going to keep repeating that. That it's because I adjust to a certain change doesn't mean I agree with it. Let me give you some examples of some recent changes. So in the last few years, we've had two new apps come to the fore, Snapchat and TikTok. I think these two apps are stupid. I think they're ridiculous. And the main reason I think that is because I'm an old man. And when I go on TikTok and see, it's a video of some guy shooting a firecracker out of his butt crack, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Are we 5 years old? So I think it's dumb. Doesn't matter. So I have been using Snapchat in my dating life for, at least 3 years now. I've become pretty good at using it. I had to adjust to it. I thought it was stupid. Why on earth would I send a thing to have it delete? And this is so stupid. And this is for teenagers. And this is dumb. But in terms of managing my FBs, I had to learn to use it. And I didn't resent it. I said, okay, I'll change. I'll do it. I don't agree with the change, but I'm going to do it. I am now posting content regularly on TikTok, unless it gets banned by Donald Trump because of the Chinese stuff that's happening right now in the news. Who knows? But regardless of that, I adjusted to these two new apps. I think they're silly, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. This is part of society. I need to adjust with the changes. If I just stamp my foot and say, nope, I'm not going to change, I will not be happy, and I want to be happy. So I will adjust to these things. I will adjust to these changes. Coronavirus. This year in 2020 has forced a lot of people in the business world to change. Change, in some cases, a 180-degree directions. Radical changes in their businesses, radical changes in their careers, in their jobs. And a lot of these people are very, very, very angry about the changes that they have to make. No, I'm not talking about being politically angry at their governments, because that I agree with. No, I'm not angry. I don't care. But in terms of the changes that they have to make, they are resentful and angry about it. Again, they're not doing what I'm recommending. You have to know that things are going to change and just roll with it. I've had to change a lot of aspects of my 5 Flags plans this year. A lot. A lot of little changes, 1 or 2 semi-big changes. Way it goes. That's just the way it goes. Life is about change. Life of the 21st century is about change. And here's the other thing, too. There are people who are perfectly happy as long as things are stable. And as soon as things change, they get all pissed off. You can't be like this. And I understand where you're coming from when people are like this. I'm an INTJ. I'm a little anal about my stuff sometimes. I like things the way I like them. So I get that, an upset comes along and a change that you weren't planning on, and now you got to change this and change this. So I understand the feelings. It doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter. You have to roll with it, and you have to accept it and stop resenting it and make the change. And make a pact with yourself that you're going to do this every year for the rest of your life. Plan on it as a constant. In next year, in 2021, guess what? There are going to be some changes coming to your life that you cannot anticipate right now that you're not going to like. And guess what, buddy? You're going to have to fucking adjust and change. And that's the way it goes. And not resent it. You don't have to agree with it, but you can't resent it. Last piece to this. Whenever you encounter a change in society, in business, in your dating life, culturally, whatever that is, that you don't like, which I'm sure is happening right now and is going to happen again for the rest of your life. When you run into that change, instead of resenting the change, try to find the positives in the change. Try to find the ways in which you can exploit the change. That's what I have done nonstop for the past 13 years. In the last 13 years, all I have done, and a little bit even before that, all I have done is look at the negative changes and ask myself, how can I profit from this? How can I exploit this? How can I benefit from this? Instead of saying, this is bullshit, I shouldn't have to do this. So, for example, monogamy has been destroyed. Monogamy used to work, quote unquote, back in the 1950s. And so marriage was, the divorce rate was 7%. It was a very stable society that way. Men still cheated like dogs. So it was monogamy in quotes, not real monogamy, but you know what I mean. That world is now gone. It is never coming back, at least not to the Western world. It's gone. It's gone forever. And this makes a lot of right-wing and traditional and religious men very, very, very angry. And by the way, I agree that society is better when you have long-term stable marriages with people. I completely agree with that. This is where I agree with the conservatives. They are right. There's a lot of facts that back this up, historical facts and statistics and things like that. Yes, society is generally better when you have a population that pair bonds men and women for a long, 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 long time, and it's good for kids and good for society and good for neighborhoods. Yes, it's all true. So that's true, but the fact that monogamy has been destroyed presents huge sexual opportunities for men like us. I am with multiple women today, and I have been for the past 13 years in a very almost near effortless way. Do you think I would be able to pull that off back in the 1950s? No. Or if I could, it would be very, very difficult and extraordinarily time-consuming. The extra effort I would have to put in to get around that hardcore traditional societal programming of the 1950s, to carry on multiple FBs, MLTRs, and OLTR marriage, all that stuff would be an absolute nightmare. And I strongly doubt that I would actually put in the time and effort to do that if I had lived back then. That would have sucked. So that is bad that monogamy doesn't work anymore, but it's also fantastic. There are bad things, but there are good things in the bad things. There is a diamond in the pile of dog turds. There's a diamond worth $1 million. And instead of looking at the pile of dog turds and saying, oh my God, look at that pile of shit. This is so terrible and wrong and awful. Instead, you grab a fucking shovel. You put one of those clothespins on your nose so you can't smell it. Okay, you keep your mouth closed so you don't get your mouth. You start digging and you find that fucking diamond. And you go, all right, cool. And the alpha male 2.0 finds the diamond while the typical traditional right-wingish, red-pillish guy is still standing there pointing at the pile of shit saying, this is bullshit. This is unfair. This is not the way it's supposed to be. You see this works? How do you exploit this? But also in business too. I've mentioned this before in my books. My grandfather started his own business back in in the early 50s, right out of World War II. He started a small insurance resale agency. And my God, it's amazing how entrepreneurs back in that era actually did this. They had no internet. They had no FedEx. That means if they wanted to send an email to someone, they had to fucking type it on a goddamn typewriter, put it in an envelope, put it in the mail, and wait a week. And then wait another week for a response. Can you imagine? They had no fax machines, no FedEx, nothing like that. Can you imagine? They had no outsourcing. They had no Upwork. They couldn't hire people in India at the click of a mouse like you and I can. They actually had to go out and hire people full-time as real jobs, secretaries and shit. They had to go rent a building. What a fucking nightmare. I am just in awe of entrepreneurs of that era. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I don't know if I would have put up with all that work and time and effort and risk. And oh my God, it's terrible. So today you can start a business that dwarfs the size of businesses they used to build back then. And you can do it for zero money with your computer that you probably already own. You don't even need a goddamn computer. You can do it with your phone. You can do it with your phone. You don't even need a computer anymore. See? The economy has changed and it's gotten much worse since the 50s. But where is the diamond in the turd pile? Location independent income, internet-based income, outsourcing, all that good stuff. You see what I'm saying? It's much better in terms of your happiness to exploit the negative changes we disagree with than to bitch about them. Make sense? This goes for business. This goes for investing. This goes for women. This goes for dating. This goes for marriage. This goes for society. This goes for cultural changes. This even goes, yes, for the collapse of the Western world. Well, what's good about that, Caleb? There is some good about that. You know how much money I've made in my gold and my silver investments this year as America continues to collapse? You know how much money I'm going to make in these things down the road? Oh my God, it's amazing. It's fucking great. Now, is it good the Western world is collapsing? No, it's a very bad thing. It's a very bad thing for the world. The Western world was, like Maximus said in the movie Gladiator, America is the light. The world is dark and America is the light, or at least the Western civilization was the light. I agree with that. I agree 100%. So it's not good. I didn't say it's good. Remember I said you don't have to agree with the changes. I said instead you don't resent the changes and you exploit from the changes. I'm going to make a lot of money and benefit tremendously, sexually too, from the collapse of the Western world. Even though I agree it's not a good thing. I can't change it, right? I can't change these things. You have no authority and no ability to change cultural trends. Even if you are a multi-billionaire, you can't change these things. So why on earth would you bitch and moan and whine about something you can't change? That is one of the most stupid and irrational things that human beings do, is bitch and moan and complain and whine and resent things they can't fucking change. It's so dumb. Don't do that. Notice I don't do that. I have never done this. If you've read my stuff for years, you notice that I do not bitch and moan and resent and get really angry, worked up about things I can't change. I don't. The things I get pissed off about, which are very few things, are things that are directly within my control. Man, in fact, the only thing that irritates me at all these days is that I'm not losing body fat fast enough. Notice that's completely within my control. So I'm much more empowered, as much as I hate that word, I'm much more empowered bitching about that and getting upset about that than who the president is or who the president isn't. Or the Western world collapsing, or, hypergamy, or whatever the fuck you're pissed off about, or currency collapse, and whatever the hell. Make sense? You've got to learn to adjust with changes, to not resent changes, and to exploit changes that occur in your life from the outside. And remember, these things are going to happen for the rest of your life. The day you don't need to worry about things changing and fucking up your plans is the day you die. When you're dead, then you can relax and you don't have to worry about that stuff. Until then, guess what? You're going to have to adjust. And that's okay. It makes life better as long as you exploit. Make sense? If you need help with any of these things or any of these concepts, you can go to joinsmic.com. That's my coaching and mentorship program. But until then, or not, I will see you in the next podcast. Bye.